The history of early Christianity covers the period from its origins to the First Council of Nicaea in 325. The first part of the period, during the lifetimes of the 12 apostles, is traditionally believed to have been initiated by the Great Commission of Jesus, and is called the Apostolic Age. The earliest followers of Jesus comprised an apocalyptic Second Temple Jewish sect, which historians refer to as Jewish Christianity. Though Paul's influence on Christian thinking is said to be more significant than that of any other New Testament author, the relationship of Paul of Tarsus and Judaism remains a matter of dispute. Early Christianity gradually grew apart from Judaism during the first 2 centuries of the Christian era. It established itself as a predominantly Gentile religion in the Roman Empire. In the ante-Nicene period, following the Apostolic Age, both incredible diversity and unifying characteristics lacking in the Apostolic period emerged simultaneously. Part of the unifying trend was an increasingly harsh rejection of Judaism and of Jewish practices. By the beginning of the Nicene period, the Christian faith had spread throughout Western Europe and the Mediterranean basin, and to North Africa and the East. See early centers of Christianity. Historians commonly use the First Council of Nicaea in 325 and the toleration, promotion of Christianity by Emperor Constantine I in the Roman Empire to mark the end of early Christianity and the beginning of the era of the first 7 ecumenical councils. Origins. See also Jesus in the Talmud. Background. Jewish messianism has its root in the apocalyptic literature of the 2nd century BC to 1st century BC, promising a future anointed leader, a Messiah, to resurrect the Israelite kingdom of God in place of the foreign rulers of the time. This corresponded with the Maccabean revolt directed against the Seleucids. Following the fall of the Hasmonean kingdom, it was directed against the Roman administration of the Judea province, which, according to Josephus, began with the formation of the Zealots during the census of Quirinius of 06 AD, though full-scale open revolt did not occur until the First Jewish-Roman War in 66 AD. Historian H. Ben Sasson has proposed that the crisis under Caligula was the first open break between Rome and the Jews. Judaism at this time was divided into antagonistic factions. The main camps were the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Zealots, but also included other less influential sects. This led to further unrest, and the 1st century BC and 1st century AD saw a number of charismatic religious leaders contributing to what would become the Mishnah of Rabbinic Judaism, including Yochanan ben Zakkai and Hanina ben Dosa. Ministry of Jesus. The Gospel accounts show the ministry of Jesus as falling into this pattern of sectarian preachers with devoted disciples. According to the Gospel writers, Jesus preached for a period of 1 to 3 years when he was in his early 30s, in the early 1st century AD. The Gospels give Jesus' method of teaching as involving parables, metaphor, allegory, proverbs, and a small number of direct sermons such as the Sermon on the Mount. His ministry of teaching, healing the sick and disabled, and performing various miracles culminated in his execution at the hands of the Roman authorities in Jerusalem. Shortly thereafter, a strong belief in Jesus' bodily resurrection spread rapidly through Jerusalem, beginning with his closest disciples, which led up to the traditional day of Pentecost. This event provoked the apostles to embark on a number of missionary campaigns to spread the good news. Following the Great Commission handed down by Jesus, most New Testament scholars agree that Peter had some sort of special position among the 12. Apostolic Age. The Christian Church sees the Apostolic Age as the foundation upon which its whole history is built. This period, roughly dated between the years 30 and 100 AD, produced writings traditionally attributed to the direct followers of Jesus Christ and is thus associated with the apostles and their contemporaries. Earliest Christianity took the form of a Jewish eschatological faith. The apostles traveled to Jewish communities around the Mediterranean Sea and attracted Jewish converts. Within 10 years of the death of Jesus, apostles had spread Christianity from Jerusalem to Antioch, Ephesus, Corinth, Thessalonica, Cyprus, Crete, and Rome. The Book of Acts reports that the early followers continued daily temple attendance and traditional Jewish home prayer. Other passages in the canonical Gospels reflect a similar observance of traditional Jewish piety, such as fasting, reverence for the Torah, and observance of Jewish holy days. In the mid-1st century, in Antioch, Paul of Tarsus began preaching to Gentiles. The new converts did not follow all Jewish law, and refused to be circumcised, as circumcision was considered repulsive in Hellenistic culture. The resulting circumcision controversy was addressed at the Council of Jerusalem about the year 50. Paul, who was vocally supported by Peter, argued that circumcision was not a necessary practice. The council agreed that converts could forego circumcision, but other aspects of Jewish law were deemed necessary. 4 years after the Council of Jerusalem, Paul wrote to the Galatians about the issue, which had become a serious controversy in the region. According to Alistair McGrath, Paul considered it a great threat to his doctrine of salvation through faith in Jesus and addressed the issue with great detail in Galatians chapter 3. The rift between Christianity and Judaism continued to grow, and the relationship between Paul of Tarsus and Judaism and the topic of biblical law in Christianity is still disputed today. The Council of Jamnia c. 85 is often stated to have condemned all who claimed the Messiah had already come, and Christianity in particular. However, the formulated prayer in question is considered by other scholars to be unremarkable in the history of Jewish and Christian relations. There is a paucity of evidence for Jewish persecution of heretics in general, or Christians in particular, in the period between 70 and 135. It is probable that the condemnation of Jamnia included many groups, of which the Christians were but one, and did not necessarily mean excommunication. Some of the later Church Fathers only recommended against synagogue attendance makes it improbable that an anti-Christian prayer was a common part of the synagogue liturgy. Jewish Christians continued to worship in synagogues for centuries. Appellation: the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Accordingly, Christians was by 49 already a familiar term, mostly in the Latin-speaking capital of the Roman Empire. As the Church spread throughout Greek-speaking Gentile lands, the appellation took prominence, and eventually became the standard reference for followers of the faith. Ignatius of Antioch was the first known Christian to use the label in self-reference and made the earliest recorded use of the term Christianity, around 100 AD. The Christian movement was referred to as the Way, based upon the well-known statement by Jesus, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." John chapter 14 verse 6. Consequently, it appears in the Acts of the Apostles, Acts chapter 9 verse 2, Acts chapter 19 verse 9 and Acts chapter 19 verse 23. Some English translations of the New Testament capitalize the way, indicating that this was how the new religion seemed then to be designated, whereas others treat the phrase as indicative the way, that way, or the way of the Lord. The Syriac version reads, "The way of God," and the Vulgate Latin version, "The way of the Lord." Judaism and Christianity. During the late 1st century, Judaism was a legal religion with the protection of Roman law, worked out in compromise with the Roman state over 2 centuries. See Anti-Judaism in the Roman Empire for details. In contrast, Christianity was not legalized until the 313 Edict of Milan. Observant Jews had special rights, including the privilege of abstaining from civic pagan rites. Christians were initially identified with the Jewish religion by the Romans, but as they became more distinct, Christianity became a problem for Roman rulers. Around the year 98, the Emperor Nerva decreed that Christians did not have to pay the annual tax upon the Jews, effectively recognizing them as distinct from Rabbinic Judaism. This opened the way to Christians being persecuted for disobedience to the emperor, as they refused to worship the state pantheon. Jewish Christians were among the earliest followers of Jesus and an important part of Judean society during the mid to late 1st century. This movement was centered in Jerusalem and led by James the Just. They held faithfully to the Torah and Jewish law, including acceptance of Gentile converts, possibly based on a version of the Noahide laws. Disputes over the Mosaic law generated intense controversy in early Christianity. This is particularly notable in the mid-1st century, when the circumcision controversy came to the fore. The issue was addressed at the Council of Jerusalem, where Paul made an argument that circumcision was not a necessary practice, vocally supported by Peter, as documented in Acts chapter 15. This position received widespread support and was summarized in a letter circulated in Antioch. 4 years after the Council of Jerusalem, Paul wrote to the Galatians about the issue, which had become a serious controversy in the region. According to Alistair McGrath, Paul considered it a great threat to his doctrine of salvation through faith in Jesus and addressed the issue with great detail in Galatians chapter 3. There was a slowly growing chasm between Christians and Jews, rather than a sudden split. However, certain events are perceived as pivotal in the growing rift between Christianity and Judaism. The Council of Jamnia c. 85 is often stated to have condemned all who claimed the Messiah had already come, and Christianity in particular. However, the formulated prayer in question is considered by other scholars to be unremarkable in the history of Jewish and Christian relations. There is a paucity of evidence for Jewish persecution of heretics in general, or Christians in particular, in the period between 70 and 135. It is probable that the condemnation of Jamnia included many groups, of which the Christians were but one, and did not necessarily mean excommunication. That some of the later Church Fathers only recommended against synagogue attendance makes it improbable that an anti-Christian prayer was a common part of the synagogue liturgy. Jewish Christians continued to worship in synagogues for centuries. The true end of ancient Jewish Christianity occurred only in the 5th century. Gentile Christianity remained the sole strand of orthodoxy and imposed itself on the previously Jewish Christian sanctuaries, taking full control of those houses of worship by the end of the 5th century. Post-apostolic period. Christianity throughout the 2nd and 3rd centuries has generally been less studied than the periods that came before and after them. This is reflected in the fact that it is usually referred to in terms of the adjacent periods with names as such: post-apostolic and ante-Nicene. However, the 2nd and 3rd centuries are quite important in the development of Christianity. There is a relative lack of material for this period, compared with the later Church Father period. For example, a widely used collection includes most 2nd and 3rd century writings in 9 volumes. This includes the writings of the Apostolic Fathers, apologists Clement of Alexandria, Irenaeus of Lyons, Origen of Alexandria, and the New Testament Apocrypha, among others. In contrast, Nicene and post-Nicene Fathers fills 28 volumes. The developments of this time are multi-directional and not easily mapped. While the preceding and following periods were diverse, they possessed unifying characteristics lacking in this period. First-century Christianity possessed a basic cohesion based on the Pauline church movement, Jewish character, and self-identification as a messianic movement. The 2nd and 3rd centuries saw a sharp divorce from its early roots. There was an explicit rejection of then-modern Judaism and Jewish culture by the end of the 2nd century, with a growing body of adversus Judaeos literature. 4th and 5th century Christianity experienced imperial pressure and developed strong episcopal and unifying structure. The ante-Nicene period was without such authority and was more diverse. Many variations in this time defy neat categorizations, as various forms of Christianity interacted in a complex fashion to form the dynamic character of Christianity in this era. By the early 2nd century, Christians had agreed on a basic list of writings that would serve as the canon. See development of the New Testament canon, but interpretations of these works differed, are often wildly, in part to ensure a greater consistency in the teachings. By the end of the 1st century, many Christian communities evolved a more structured hierarchy, with a central bishop, whose opinion held more weight in that city. By 160, most communities had a bishop who based his authority on the chain of succession from the apostles to himself. Bishops still had a freedom of interpretation. The competing versions of Christianity led many bishops who subscribed to what is now the mainstream version of Christianity to rally more closely together. Bishops would call synods to discuss problems or doctrinal differences in certain regions. The first of these to be documented occurred in Rome in Asia in about 160. Some bishops began to take on a more authoritative role for a region. In many cases, the bishop of the church located in the capital city of a province became the central authority for all churches in that province. These more centralized authorities were known as metropolitan churches headed by a metropolitan bishop. The churches in Antioch, Alexandria, and Rome exerted authority over groups of these metropolitan churches. Spread of Christianity. Early Christianity spread from city to city in the Hellenized Roman Empire and beyond into East Africa and South Asia. Apostles traveled extensively, establishing communities in major cities and regions throughout the empire. The original church communities were founded by apostles and numerous other Christian soldiers, merchants, and preachers in northern Africa, Asia Minor, Armenia, Arabia, Greece, and other places. Over 40 were established by the year 100, many in Asia Minor, such as the 7 churches of Asia. By the end of the 1st century, Christianity had already spread to Greece and Italy, some say as far as India, serving as foundations for the expansive spread of Christianity throughout the world. In 301 AD, the Kingdom of Armenia became the first to declare Christianity as its state religion, following the conversion of the royal house of the Arsacids in Armenia. Despite sporadic incidents of local persecution and a few periods of persecution on an empire-wide scale, the Christian religion continued its spread throughout the Mediterranean basin. There is no agreement as for how Christianity managed to spread so successfully prior to the Edict of Milan and Constantine favoring the Creed, and it is probably not possible to identify a single cause for this. Traditionally, this has not been the subject of much research, as from a theological point of view the success was simply the natural consequence of people meeting what theologians considered the truth. In the influential book, The the rise of Christianity. Rodney Stark argues that the various sociological factors of Christianity which improved the quality of life of its adherents were crucial for its triumph over paganism. Another factor that may have contributed to the success of Christianity was how the Christian promise of a general resurrection of the dead combined the traditional Greek belief that true immortality depended on the survival of the body with practical explanations of how this was going to actually happen at the end of times.